Hey, what's up everybody? This is Crystal Digital Rim, and in this video we're going to cover the 7 easy steps of filming with your phone. It doesn't matter if it's an Android or an iPhone. So with that being said, we're going to hop right into it. Let's go. Okay, first step is finding a location. Make sure you find a location that's well lit, it has an interesting background, and things of that nature. And also, more than anything, make sure the location is quiet. Make sure it's a quiet location, that it doesn't have a lot of noise going on, because you also want to consider the audio with your video. So finding a location is step number 1. Alright, so step number 2 is choose a good background. Pretty much we found the location, so now you just want to angle your camera, make your composition where you have an interesting background, have elements of your background that gives context of the story or context of the actual content that you're talking about. So let's say if you are talking about books, your background may be a library or maybe some place that has books in the background. That's just a simple example, but again, consider your background when you are creating your shot. So coming up with your composition. Again, visually interesting things will definitely give the viewer context on what this video is about and tells them where you are in the world. So you kind of want to set the scene in that fashion. So definitely choose a good background, or choosing a background is very key. But more than anything, when you are in the background, make sure you are not standing against the wall. You want that depth. You want to be perceived in some type of environment, again, inside of the world somewhere that, again, if you want to say adds to your content or adds to your story or adds to what you're talking about, you want to choose an environment that does that, and choose a background within that environment that does that. Alright, so step number 3 is camera settings. This is one of the things that's easily overlooked, but we're going to get right into it. So camera settings, you want to make sure you go into your iPhone's or iPhone, Android, doesn't matter, but your phone's camera settings, and you want to make sure you turn your resolution up to the highest resolution possible. If you can shoot in 4K, shoot it in 4K. If you only can shoot in 1920 by 1080, shoot in 1920 by 1080 or 2K, whatever one, but turn it up all the way to the highest resolution possible. Now on top of that, you also want to make sure your frames per second, being FPS, more than likely it says on your device, but frames per second is at least 30 frames per second or more. You can go to 60 frames per second, or stay at 30 frames per second. Now I'm gonna give you the caveat for both of these settings, right? So the caveat for both of these settings is, if you shoot in 4K, more than likely the file size of your videos are going to be a lot larger. So you're going to have to consider how you're going to save the files, either it be on the cloud or on a hard drive, but those file sizes will be a lot larger, will take up a lot more space. So you want to consider that. Also, again, with 30 frames per second compared to 60 frames per second, you're going to take up more file space. So 60 frames per second is a lot more images within a second, or double the images within a second, so that's going to be a larger file size. Now that's the downside. The upside is 4K. Of course, your resolution is a lot better. It's more versatile. So if you are going to use this footage in multiple areas, let's say you're doing it on YouTube and then you want to go to Instagram and things like that, now you're able to crop a lot better and not lose as much resolution or make it look blurry, because again, you can always take the resolution from 4K to 1920, but you can't go from 1920 to 4K. So you can always go down, but you can never go up. So it's better to capture it as high as quality as possible. Then you can also always crop in when necessary. So you want to consider that. Now, as far as the frame rate, 30 frames per second versus 60 frames per second. 60 frames per second is going to allow you to be able to, essentially, they call it bullet time, but slow down footage. So you can have a video going at regular speed, and maybe you want to just slow it down at a certain point. It's going to make that look a lot smoother, because again, at the minimum before you start to see things look a little choppy, it's 24 frames per second. So that's giving you a lot more room to work with, as far as you can take the speed of your video down half, and it's going slower, but it still looks smooth to the eye. So again, these are all things you want to consider, but with that being said, it is going to increase your file size by maxing out your device. So way it best fits for you. Now, out of the box, if you are new, if you're a beginner, if you're just starting in this journey, I personally suggest you put the settings as high as possible if you can do that. But at minimum, 1920 by 1080 at 30 frames per second is going to give you the versatility to go to YouTube, go to Instagram, wherever you're going to post to, is going to give you that versatility to be able to do that. Now, when you upgrade your device and upgrade your storage, then of course consider moving on to higher file sizes or bigger file sizes for higher resolution and frames per second. So consider that. That is camera settings number 3. So boom. Step number 4, or tip number 4. This is something that's easily overlooked, and you can see it over the internet now that I'm going to point it out to you, but easily overlooked, that can enhance your video quality exponentially. So put your camera into manual mode. I can't emphasize this enough. Put your camera in the manual mode. We get a lot of these devices like it does autofocus, it does auto exposure and all this stuff. And you'll notice it when you watch a video and then it's going in and out of focus. If the person is talking and they're using their hands and then it goes out of focus for their face, that's because the autofocus is trying to figure out and calculate where the actual point of interest is. So you want to put it in manual mode. You want to set your camera up in manual mode. So with your phone, you can put everything into manual mode, and then once you frame your subject for your composition, just simply tap on what you want to focus on, being their face more than likely, but tap on their face and it's going to stay locked on their face as far as the manual. That's where we want to manually focus at all times. And if it doesn't have a lock feature to lock on their face, if they stand in the same exact place, the focal length is going to be at that depth. So it's going to allow that portion of the video to stay focused. As long as they don't move forward and back from the camera, it's going to allow that depth from the camera to stay in focus. So again, you want to manually set that up. Tell your subject, stand right here, I'm gonna set my manual focus. Now when you are talking, you can move side to side, you can move up and down, but don't move front and back, because that's gonna put us in and out of focus. You don't want them to move front and back. So again, let them know that. Also, with that being said, when you are in manual mode, it also does it for exposure. This is great for outside. Like if you're filming outside, you've probably done this before, but if you're filming outside and you set up your composition and you let's say you're in auto mode, but you're in auto mode, and when you first set up your composition, the sun was out. Then in the middle of the filming, maybe the sun went behind the cloud. Now that just changed your whole lighting settings. So your whole lighting setup, and then your auto exposure is trying to figure out and recalculate, which again, that makes, when you're going into editing, jumping in, it will make your footage look like you're jumping as far as what the lighting look like. The lighting conditions are changing. Like it's bright in this part of the video, then it all of a sudden gets darker here, then you're cutting on that. So it's like light, dark, and it's very dramatic. If you just put it in the manual mode, you can keep a consistent look throughout the video, so you can keep that consistent look. And if you have to, let's say the cloud makes it get really dark, you can then go and correct that in the editing process. So with that being said, set your camera when you are filming, set it to manual mode and set all of the settings there in manual mode. So the focus, the exposure and all this stuff, so you can control it on the back end when you're going into editing. So that's a tip that's easily overlooked by beginners, because they're like, I can just put everything in auto and it's gonna do exactly what I needed to do. But then they get into editing and they're like, man, this looks amateur because the exposure isn't the same as the exposure here. And then they end up going down the rabbit hole trying to match the exposures, and it just ends up getting real messy. And then again, with focus as well. So consider that. Put your camera in manual mode, shoot that way. I highly suggest it. Even for shooting these videos or shooting in a studio environment, even if it's not on your actual phone, but shooting in a studio environment, you might be tempted to, because you have a DSLR camera that's supposed to be the best camera, and just be like, I'm gonna just put it on autofocus so it'll automatically focus. Same thing, put it in manual mode, set up where you're gonna sit, and then, you know, focus on that area where you're gonna sit, you're gonna stay, and then you can do all the hand movements and everything. Your face will never go out of focus, and you will always remain in focus, but you can move however you really want to and not worry about that in and out of focus where things get blurry. So that's a super tip, and I want you all to take that. Again, now that you know this, you're gonna start to notice it on other channels where, you know, you could tell they're not in manual mode and their focus is going in and out. And it's gonna start, to me, it starts to bother you when you see it. Like, hey, it's simply a simple fix. So make sure you change your settings to manual mode. Okay, step number 5, shoot horizontally. Now, this is something that, again, is easily overlooked because most people, when they have their phone, they go ahead and shoot the same way they are looking at their phone. So they'll shoot just like this. And this is also dependent on where you're gonna post your content. So if you know you're gonna post your content to social media where the aspect ratio is square, like it's a square aspect ratio, this is perfectly fine. Shooting like this is perfectly fine. But for the maximum versatility, if you want to be able to post to YouTube, if you want to be able to post to, you know, you want to be able to put this on a screen somewhere, you want to be able to send this file off to, you know, make for a commercial for a company or some, whatever the case may be, they're going to put this on TV or whatever the case, you want to make sure you're shooting horizontally. You want to make sure your camera is just like this because, again, even looking at the screen, it's just like the screen you would see when you were watching, you know, watching Netflix or watching TV. You want to set your camera up just like that. So again, you're capturing the 4K image in the actual you know, position that you are actually going to view it in. So it's going to give you the maximum effect as far as the 4K. When you capture it this way, it's going to crop out your 4K to the middle part, and it's no longer going to be 4K. So you want to make sure you are shooting in this aspect ratio. When I say 4K, it could be 1920 by 1080, it could be whichever aspect ratio, but it's, again, you want to shoot just like this so you have the most versatility. Now you might be asking, well, what if I want to post to YouTube and Instagram or something like that, or Twitter? Well, more than likely you will be able to take this footage and just crop off the sides. So then you have this footage that looks like this, and you just crop off the sides, and now you have your Instagram footage. And you can, again, move that left to right depending on where the subject of the video is. But again, you have more versatility of being able to crop it out, crop them off. But again, you can't, if you shoot like this, you won't be able to take this square image and stretch it to be at this aspect ratio, or, you know, at the TV aspect ratio. And you've probably seen this on YouTube where you could tell somebody shot their video like this, and now they have the big black bars on the side. So if they simply just turn their phone to the side, shoot like that, they're gonna fill up their screen with the actual footage, and they can, again, think about composition and making it correct. So boom, that's that. All right. Step number 6, make sure your phone is level. So there are multiple ways to do this. The easiest way without any extra equipment is make sure you turn on your grid lines on your phones. So go into your settings, find grid lines. You might have to Google it depending on your device, but find grid lines, how to turn it on your device. Find those grid lines, and those grid lines are essentially, just like it says, grid lines, which will help guide you when you are holding your phone up and you see a certain subject now, or filming a certain subject. So I'll use an example. Let's say you're filming a field, or a baseball field. You can use those lines that are overlaid on your footage, which is not going to be in the end result, but you can use those lines to be like, okay, I know this bottom line needs to align with the horizon. So now if I'm moving and that line, you know, tilts and the horizon is still straight, well, I know that I'm not straight anymore, so I can line that back up. So using those grid lines as guides to keep you straight. Boom, just like that. But now, also with that being said, if you want to take it up a level, you can also get something similar to this. This is called a gimbal. They make these for phones and they make these for cameras. So you can get a gimbal. On top of having grid lines, you can now set your phone into a gimbal. So then you could put a gimbal essentially helps you keep your phone straight and keep your phone, keep your phone level. So with that being said, with the grid line added with the grid lines, you can now set your phone level, And then now when you put your phone in one of these things, it doesn't matter if you move left or right, up or down or whatever. You can move all you want, but it'll stay level. So now your video will be consistent. It allows a lot more fluid video. It looks very professional by simply just having a gimbal to keep it level. So again, keep your phone level. That's a super tip as far as making your videos look much more better than they probably already are or currently are. So level, keep it level. Okay, step number 7, and this is easily overlooked, and you want to really take this one very seriously because it can save you so much headache. So step number 7 being double check your video. When you are on set, before you're saying, okay, video is complete, we're done, make sure your video is good. Make sure you check the sound quality. Make sure you check, listen to it. Make sure you look at it. Make sure you like the, make sure you like the, what's being said, the context, how it's being delivered, all of this stuff before you start to take things down, before you start to remove lighting, before you start to change location, before you start to do any of that, make sure you like the video. So put in, if you're listening for audio, that's an easy one to overlook. If you're checking your audio, make sure you put your earbuds in or whatever, your headphones, to listen to the audio to see what it sounds like. If it's, a bus that passed by where they couldn't hear a certain portion of the video, you want to be able to hear this as soon as possible, and kind of like before you start to break stuff down and see if we have to retake this or reshoot this part or redo this part, because again, it's going to be hard to remove that bus sound and edit, and it's going to be hard for the viewer to hear what they need to hear if they hear that bus sound that's roaring over your actual audio. So you want to make sure and that's just an example. So you want to make sure you listen to your audio, you view your audio, and make sure you like your audio before you start to say we're done. We can take all the lighting down, or we can move locations, or we're done for today. Let's just leave. Before you do all that, make sure you check your audio. Make sure you like it. Alright, so there it is. Those are the 7 steps of filming with your phone. It doesn't matter if it's an Android or an iPhone. Simply by following these 7 steps, you'll start to see your video quality increase exponentially. Now, if you found value in this lesson, if you found value in these 7 steps, make sure you share this with somebody else who can get the same value out of these 7 steps to increase the quality of their video. So with that being said, do that one thing that takes you closer to your goals. All y'all have a blessed day. Later, y'all. Peace.